The room was filled with an atmosphere of anticipation, as if the air itself was charged with unspoken desires. A tingling sensation in her stomach and a persistent thought gnawed at her, urging her to seek male companionship that could ignite her deepest fantasies. But what to do when her 20-year-old nephew was peacefully asleep in the next room? The most audacious and thrilling option emerged: to embark on an adventure where he, unwittingly, would become the focus. With a sly smile, sitting in the room, her gaze was fixed on her nephew. What was he doing? This question demanded an immediate answer. A light touch on his shoulder interrupted his sleep. Waking up, he heard a story about strange sounds outside and a request to check what was happening. Of course, it was merely a pretext to get him out of bed. The plan worked flawlessly. As if enchanted, he rose from the bed, a playful smile appearing on his face. Stepping cautiously, as if on forbidden ground, he left the room, adding a touch of drama to the moment. His eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness, and he headed towards the door, as if tracking an invisible foe. Awakened under the pretext of mysterious sounds, he had no idea he had become part of an elaborate scheme. And there he was, like a character in a film, creeping down the hallway. His bare feet touched the floor silently, each step a small triumph over the night's silence. He felt as if he were playing the lead in a thrilling movie, though in reality, he was just trying to find the source of strange sounds. Something elusive hung in the air, something he couldn't quite grasp. Returning with a puzzled expression, he reported that he had found nothing unusual. After a brief silence, he headed to the bathroom. Seizing the moment, she turned on the light in the room and considered her next move. Should she continue this game? Did her nephew share these desires? Leaning back on the bed, she sighed doubtfully. Should she give in to temptation or let events unfold naturally? But before a decision was made, a strange sound, like a muffled whisper, came from the bathroom. Quietly getting out of bed, she approached the bathroom door, wondering what was happening inside. Was he doing something forbidden? A surge of hormones made her mind wander down dangerous paths. However, she tried to maintain self-control, convincing herself it was just her imagination. She decided to return and give him some privacy. Once again under the covers, she tried to focus on something other than the images her mind persistently projected. The minutes stretched agonizingly long as she wrestled with her thoughts. Finally, she heard the sound of the bathroom door opening and her nephew emerging. Trying to remain calm, she waited for him to approach the room. "I don't want to sleep anymore," she said with a strained smile, inviting him to join her. "Want to get some breakfast together?" Her nephew happily accepted the offer, and they headed to the kitchen together. While preparing breakfast, she tried to quell her surging hormones, but the tension mounted, and her heart beat faster and faster. She desperately tried to focus on something else to distract herself from the intrusive thoughts. After finishing breakfast, they sat at the table and chatted about everything that came to mind. She tried to maintain a casual atmosphere, but her hormones continued to rage, and every smile from her nephew sent a thrilling sensation through her. There was something she hadn't revealed, something that kept her awake at night, making her question her own sanity. Her nephew, he was obsessed. He always wanted something more, something she couldn't give him. She felt his gaze on her, full of longing. Behind every smile, every kind gesture, lay a hidden meaning. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just a teenage crush, but she couldn't help but notice how he looked at her every time they were together. Perhaps that's why he so readily agreed to have breakfast together. It wasn't about the breakfast, but the opportunity to be close, alone. During their conversation, his gaze relentlessly followed her every move, as if he craved something more. She tried to remain calm, but his every word seemed ambiguous. She couldn't shake the feeling that her nephew saw her as something more than just an aunt. But out of respect, she never allowed herself any liberties. That had always been her stance. Despite hints and gestures that crossed the line of decency, she always kept her distance, trying to ignore what was happening. What would happen next? What secrets and desires would be revealed in this tangled story? However, circumstances had drastically changed. A period arrived when she felt a need for male companionship, for someone who could ignite a spark of life within her. And as fate would have it, her nephew was nearby at that moment. She desperately tried to suppress these thoughts, convincing herself of the absurdity of even fleetingly considering such an idea. But despite all her efforts, she couldn't ignore the attraction she felt towards him. A little fun won't hurt anyone, right? She mused, trying to justify her feelings. After all, he probably felt the same way, didn't he? She sought to convince herself that there was nothing wrong with it, and with unexpected resolve, she approached her nephew. Why should I feel guilty for seeking a small adventure? She asked herself. Her husband wasn't around, and his absence presented a unique opportunity. An opportunity to explore the complex feelings that had arisen between her and her nephew. At that moment, she was driven only by the desire to enjoy the present and experience pleasure. After all, her husband wouldn't find out. It would be an affair between her and her nephew, a secret known only to the two of them. She knew she was playing with fire, proposing a clandestine affair that no one else should know about. She made it clear that everything that happened between them would remain a secret, an unspoken pact binding them in silence. He agreed, nodding in assent, showing that he, too, craved a secret connection. At that moment, it became clear that he shared her desires. They understood they were defying societal norms and risked losing everything, yet at the same time, they felt truly alive, reveling in the passion and complicity that united them. Once all doubts vanished, nothing else mattered, neither her husband nor the moral implications of their actions. The only thing that mattered was the here and now, the all-consuming passion they shared. They let go, giving themselves to each other completely. In those moments, there was no room for regrets or doubts, only an insatiable craving to be together. They dared to step into uncharted territory, exploring the boundaries of what was permissible. But in this madness, they found a liberation they had never experienced before, as if breaking free from the shackles of limitations and expectations that had long weighed them down. And so, they surrendered to the current, unconcerned with the consequences, seeking only to have a good time and enjoy each other's company. It was an unforgettable night, one of those that take your breath away and make you feel more alive than ever before. It had been a long time since she had experienced such an adrenaline rush, a feeling of balancing on the edge and letting the moment carry you into uncharted territory. And most importantly, her husband never found out what happened between them that night. They kept their encounter a strict secret, shielding their adventure from prying eyes. Only a week had passed since then, and her husband suspected nothing. Their secret remained unsolved, known only to her and her nephew. But despite the apparent calm, the desire to repeat the experience relentlessly tormented her from within. However, everything had become much more complicated now. Her husband had returned home, and she was no longer alone. The temptation to succumb to passion again was incredibly strong, but she understood she couldn't risk being exposed. Time spent together could expose them and jeopardize her marriage. And although the thought of another encounter with her nephew beckoned, she recognized the need to resist the temptation to preserve everything she held dear. Her nephew began flooding her with WhatsApp messages, expressing an insatiable desire to repeat their experience. His persistence grew increasingly intrusive, like a tempting force difficult to resist. She pleaded with him to stop texting, explaining that her husband might accidentally see the messages and uncover their secret. Every time her phone chimed with a notification from him, she was overcome with the temptation to reply in agreement, to relive those thrilling moments. But at the same time, a chill ran through her, reminding her of the danger each message posed. She didn't want to reject him, but she knew it was necessary. She couldn't afford to risk exposure. So she begged him to stop communicating, asserting that it would be better for both of them to keep their distance. But despite her pleas, his persistence didn't wane. Each day, she received more messages, filled with a passionate desire to be with her again. She couldn't help but wonder how the listeners of this story would judge her connection with her nephew. Did she realize she had betrayed her husband, or did it not matter? After all, it was just a fleeting adventure, wasn't it? She believed that everyone has moments of weakness, when they succumb to temptation and lose their heads. Haven't we all had a fling at some point? Yet she wondered what those listening to this story thought of her. Did they condemn her for what she had done? Did they consider her guilty of infidelity to her husband? She understood that her actions might seem reprehensible, but at the same time, she realized she was just a human being, with desires and needs, like everyone else. She felt no regrets, nor did she intend to blame herself for what had happened. Therefore, she addresses the listeners with a question: what do you think of me? Did I act wrongly, or is this normal?